here or New York, Occupy Wall Street, or elsewhere, has any candidate or candidates emerged from the movement? So
no, it's much too soon. I don't know if it's even. It has to develop organically. We're still at such an early stage of the process. There has to be a lot of discussion like this and all over the place all the time, and the formulation of a kind of general analysis, and the analysis which keeps in mind the systemic question. And then if people from within the group who thoroughly embrace that systemic analysis can come forward as candidates and organization to back them, then we could talk about it.
Nobody, like Michael Moore.
Yeah.
I mean, all kinds of like poverty specialists, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Nobody has come to take the lead. I mean, there are lots of people.
The movement is specifically requesting at this time, and that's through the general consensus, that is not what's wanted and needed yet. And I think people are respecting that. I think that if any of you saw the short clip of John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis in Atlanta, being at the Occupy Atlanta recently, who, in my mind, he is one of the few, people that I would look to as a politician. When they decided in the General Assembly to not have him speak because it was not part of he very humbly and very graciously left. I think that people are trying to honor what's being built here. And yes, I do think that people will emerge. I really think they will, and I think that they'll emerge stronger than they would have otherwise.
There's a lot of criticism, there's no focus, there are all kinds of stuff.
Water over the back,
Yeah, but,
Can I just ask a favor in the spirit of community? Would people be willing to just say their first names as they speak? Because I might see you again and want to say, hey, how you doing?
My name is Anil.
Anil. Thanks.
Mine is Michael. I met you the other day.
Yes, I met you the other day.
My name is Smitty.
I'm Angela.
And I'd like to say that in Massachusetts, we did have Jill Stein, who tried.
She did.
And now we have a woman, Elizabeth Warren, who at least would be much better than Scott Brown. And she seems real. So.
But that's always.
But we do need people from a movement that will like.
But that's always the problem. It's always what you were saying. The Democrats are going to use the Tea Party to say, look how scary they are, look how horrible they are, and to bring us back in there. And every single time any popular movement gets sucked into the Democrat Party, the life gets taken out of it, and it may as well just go in the grave. Because if you think about it, the labor movement of the 1930s, they hitched their star to the Democrat Party, the radicals were purged, and the labor movement was gutted. The anti-war movement of the 60s and 70s, and even against the Iraq War, they hitched their star to the Democrat Party. Again and again, they have served the interests of capital, of empire, and racism. Every time. They are not friends of the working class. That's not to say, as Victor said, that there are not good Democrats, but as an institution, it is utterly corrupt and utterly unreformable, and we need to do something else, something better, and I think we're starting to do it now.
Wonderful. How do we then do that?
We're doing it here.
But if we have no money,
Just talk.
Hey, I'm Steve, and I would just like to say that any progress we've made on the left has only been when a president has no other choice but to react to a popular movement. FDR didn't run on the New Deal. He reacted to a moment like this.
right.
The people on the street defined the New Deal. It wasn't his idea.
Right.
Johnson dragged his feet and was a classical reactionary in racial matters until he reacted to Martin Luther King's sponsorship and the civil rights movement, which started on the street.
Right.
So if we're looking to our leaders to lead, that's not the way it works. It's the people on the street begin a conversation, which can't be ignored, and then the opportunists that they are, the whores that they are, actually grab onto our ideas and say, hey, that's right, that's what I wanted to say all along. It's the only way. The last president that was afraid of us was Richard Nixon.
Yeah.
And I was there in the 70s, and Lyndon Johnson too. We drove Lyndon Johnson from office. He got on the television one night and said, I will not run or accept a second term. And that's because people on the street made him pay the price for war. And it was only this conversation, people on the street jumping up and down and making total nuisances of ourselves and doing the best we can, that we know they're going to try to hijack this movement. The question is, what movement are they going to hijack? So we got to have our homework done when they do stand in front, and we point to them and say, yeah, you can be the leader for now. But the Tea Party had some success because they hijacked the Republican Party. There's only 2 flavors. You can have any flavor you want, as long as it's chocolate or vanilla in America. You only get 2. Democrats and the Republicans,
like
and
orange
that
sherbet.
sucks. And that sucks. So we want them to hijack our democracy, which we can take back. We can take back that party.
I'd just like to comment briefly on an excellent statement. Do our homework. That means not just occasional talks like this, but study groups, discussion groups, a constant thing. I mean, one thing I didn't mention that's also a part of the present crisis that wasn't there in the 1930s is the environmental crisis, which has created a tremendous level of urgency and which isn't discussed, because that involves discussions of how we all have to reorganize the society in order to not have to use as much energy, for example.
I had one question.
Can I say
Someone who
something?
hasn't spoken yet?
Please.
Yeah. Oh, is there
Is
somebody
anyone-
who hasn't spoken?
someone who hasn't yet spoken?
Okay.
Yeah, you had your hand up.
I was just saying that.
Speak up.
Yeah, sure. My name's Ryan, and I was thinking that this idea that we only ever have 2 parties to compromise between, I think these party politics died a death just recently. When people are polled who they'll vote for when it comes to a presidential candidate, 50% of them say they'll consider voting independent. That's a dramatic exponential increase over any polls during our lifetime. And that's irrespective of people's consideration of a policy direction. So we can create a choice through our conversations.
Fuck you, party.
In that sense, that's something that I wanted to speak to. Again, I'm Angela, and about the whole thing about learning our history. One of the things that I'm hoping to be able to contribute to this movement is some of my experiences going through several of movements and what we learned from each of them. And right here in this town, in fact, we have a beautiful example of the Rainbow Party. The folks who built that Rainbow Party, it endured for almost 20 years, and candidates were elected behind that. It was a very independent, and it wasn't national, well, it was actually, if you think of Jesse Jackson and all that. But aside from party politics, one of the things that I did about learning more for myself is that I'm like, who are the voices that we're not hearing yet about what could happen? And there are a group of African American women, I can't pronounce the word, economists, who have been writing for years and years about what they see can happen. And I actually wrote them. I knew some of them, but I knew I wouldn't remember it. And I just wanted to, so maybe if you'll go back and Google them, that'd be great. And right here in this town, she's actually a white woman, Randy Albelda, a good friend of mine from long, long ago. She's here local. She knows what she's talking about in terms of building something different. But some of the women of color, Dr. Margaret Sims, she is a vice president at one of the most progressive black or African American think tanks. And she is the vice president at the Joint Center for Political, these things aren't as important. But she has written extensively about what can happen to address perpetual poverty in this country. And, beyond just the rhetoric, she's really talking about practical measures. Julianne Malveaux, a woman named Rhonda M. Williams, she was somebody I did not know, and she's part of something called a Sister Circle, Black Women in Work Collective. If you Google these people, and I'll be glad to give you this, there's stuff online about what they're saying would make a difference. And I really am hoping that we can reach just a little beyond what our common understanding and information is this time, and include some of these voices as well. And loved hearing yours.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you.
So, any other questions, observations, comments, suggestions?
Everybody calls Massachusetts a blue state. I'm Steve. We're not really a blue state. The largest party in Massachusetts is unenrolled, also known as independent. There are more independent voters in Massachusetts than any other party. And there are maybe 7 or 8 states where that's true. So we do have the groundwork for the conversation but the real challenge will be to move any of the Republicans our way. So to be an independent doesn't really mean anything. It just means that you're that you don't fit neatly into the Democratic box, and you're totally frustrated with the other side. So I just wanted to point that out, that a third party is the reason I think Clinton got elected, right, with Ross Perot. That's the reason that there was somebody, and it's how Bush carried Florida with the third party, with the third vote, and it always sends a fracture.
That's disputable.
Right.
Yeah, right. Well,
Wait, he tells the
if you
story.
discount all the thievery and the
the
incompetence,
thievery is a big thing.
right, and the incompetence.
And the coup d'état by
But
the
it's only
Supreme
when there's
Court.
another voice. A third voice seems to just sow the seeds of a lot of bad stuff for anybody trying to make a change.
Well, yeah. See that's why the whole electoral effort has to be entered very cautiously. I mean, there's an important aspect of our movement now, which is called the democracy movement, which is centered actually in Madison, Wisconsin. And of course, one of the things that they're trying to popularize is the idea that this simple majority, single ballot system is undemocratic on its face, and it discriminates against other candidates. And if you have instant runoff voting, you can vote in your order of preference. And so if your preferred candidate gets in, does not get in, then at least your second choice gets another vote.
You rank your votes, right?
Yeah, right. So this is part of political education, is talking about different mechanisms. Although I think the basic aspect of political education is discussing the class structures of the society and the basic underlying economic interests. But these mechanisms are important because we do want to ultimately present a kind of positive alternative.
But I think also, if we're talking about political education or forming independent parties, to what end? Are we merely seeking to reform it so that the 1% don't rob us as much as they do now? Are we merely seeking it to make sure that the banks are maybe slightly more regulated, but they're still functioning, they're still getting rich off of the labor of people here? Or are we actually going to try and make it do like what Bertolt Brecht called the simple thing, but it's so hard to do, and that is to put a system where people ultimately become before profits, where all our needs are provided for. I don't think it's quite that radical that everyone has a right to health care, to an education, that no one should be foreclosed, no one should lose their home, that everyone has the right to freely develop their personality. And why are we engaged in these wars that do not serve anyone's interests here, but only serve the interests of those people up there, of the ruling elite, and of these ruling parties? So if we are going to get involved in politics, to what end? Merely to reform this system or to build a new one? And you could call it socialism, communism, anarchism, or something else, but to what end to enter politics? Merely to make the system run better, or to put a new one that actually does serve popular needs in the working class?
Excuse me, may I interrupt you just for a moment? Mic check!
Mic check!
Mic check!
Mic check!
Facilitation group is meeting over there right now. We need some more people. You do not have to be experienced, but we need you now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I think on the long-term level, I agree entirely. But in the short term, you can't avoid these politics. And by demanding the whole thing, we create a movement to which those in power will respond, as in the case of the New Deal, by doing little bits of it, which do improve people's lives somewhat, and also by so doing add credit to our movement in the sense that if people can see positive immediate results as a result of the presence of a force that's asking for much more, they will rally to our cause and bring others as well. So the two processes are interrelated.
I'm not counterposing reform to revolution or something. I speak very much like Rosa Luxemburg, the great German revolutionary, who said, we struggle for reforms, and she was a revolutionary. She was admitted of this, but she said reforms to educate people, to get people involved in the struggle, because when you're out there leafleting, balloting, doing what we're doing here, holding signs, you are getting an education. But ultimately, those reforms are not going to change the systemic nature of the basic system, that ultimately it's going to have to be the working class and popular movements that do have to take power to put a new system in its place.
I agree with that, sure. Yeah.
Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, right.
What sort of steps do you think we can take specifically as an individual to sort of promote this idea of a third party or reform aside from our vote?
What steps can we take as individuals? I would say that the first thing always is to become better informed, to use the alternative media and then to talk to all your friends and associates and colleagues, whatever, everyone, and then to begin to organize them. I mean, to bring them together to discuss the things, and always on the principle that many intelligences coming together are better than one. So that's the first step, and then you as you follow the events and with the analysis of it, you're aware of other things like it being done. You hook up with other people, and that's sort of part of creating a network. And then you may go eventually to conferences. It might be local or national. You might even organize one locally, local, national conferences where people exchange ideas and network. And then there's all these technological media, which are, as long as they're kept sort of as auxiliary and not the main thing, can be very helpful as well. So I mean, there's no real formula. In a way, this is something that does have to be rediscovered each time with the people who are there and available and ready to do something. But I mean, I think those are the first steps, you might say. Sure. Yeah.
One quick thing. If everything is peacefully done, how much leeway do you have with law enforcement system? Because law enforcement and legal system are very, very tough. You just go this way and you're in trouble. So
they're enforcing property rights.